Okay, we are just about finished with the small plates of Nephi in the Book of Mormon, and we are about to start the part of the Book of Mormon where the great prophet and historian Mormon is abridging and compiling the records. But before we do that, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So I want to give you a semi-brief recap of everything so far. So Lehi and his family leave Jerusalem before it's destroyed. Lehi's oldest sons, Laman and Lemuel, have super bad attitudes the whole time. Sam seems fine, and Nephi is a super spiritual giant who also happens to be super buff. They finally, after several years, make it to somewhere in the Americas, which is the Promised Land. Lehi eventually dies. Laman and Lemuel hate Nephi and plot to kill him. So Nephi takes off with the rest of his family and anyone who wants to follow Christ, and they end up settling a new land, and they call it the Land of Nephi. They build a temple, and they are super happy there. From this point on, the people who follow Nephi and who believe in Christ are called the Nephites, and those who hate Nephi and want to destroy them are called the Lamanites. Nephi gets old and gives his plates to his brother Jacob. Jacob writes a whole bunch of cool stuff and then passes them on to his son Enos. Enos writes about prayer and the Nephites' efforts to try to convert the Lamanites to the gospel. Then he passes it on to his son Jarom. Jarom writes a little bit about how they're looking forward to the coming of Christ and how the Nephites have many prophets who are trying to keep them on track. This kind of introduces what we often call the pride cycle. If you want to know what we mean when we talk about the pride cycle, it's when the people are righteous, they are blessed. Oftentimes, those blessings cause them to get prideful. They forget to humble themselves before the Lord and start relying on worldly things. The Lord stops blessing them and they suffer. When they are suffering, they remember the Lord and begin to be righteous again. When they are righteous, they are blessed. Oftentimes, those blessings cause them to get prideful, and so on, and so on. You get the point. So then after Jarom is done writing, he passes the plates on to his son Omni. The book of Omni covers a lot of time and just a little amount of writing. Omni mentions that he was a wicked man and fought much with the sword. He doesn't have much else to say, so then he passes on the plates to his son Ammoron. Ammoron talks about the pride cycle again by mentioning that many of the wicked Nephites were destroyed. Once he is done, he passes it on to his brother Chemish. Chemish writes one verse and then gives it to his son Abinadon. I'm just going to pause right here for a second, because if you could write one verse in the Book of Mormon, what would you want to make sure that you included in that verse? Now remember, you only get one verse, so that's like maybe 1 or 2 sentences max. I'm trying to look through Chemish's eyes and understand why, for his one verse in the Book of Mormon, he decided to include the information that he did. You can find it in Omni chapter 1, verse 9. Maybe it's a testimony about following the commandments of the prophets, even if you don't feel like you have a lot to contribute. I'm not really sure, but either way, I think it's important to think, what would I include personally if I got to write one verse in the Book of Mormon? But I digress. Where was I? Oh yeah, so after Chemish writes his one verse, he passes the plates to his son Abinadon. Abinadon gets 2 verses and writes about killing a bunch of Lamanites in defense of his people and how a fuller account of their people are on the larger plates. He understands, though, that the purpose of these plates, the smaller plates of Nephi, are to put the sacred things. So he mentions that he doesn't know of any other prophecies or teachings that need to be added, so he then passes them on to his son Amalekite. I personally think what Amalekite writes is really cool. He talks about the great King Mosiah, and this is the grandpa of the King Mosiah that the Book of Mosiah is written about, or is named after. Mosiah is warned by the Lord to flee the land of Nephi. He does, and the people follow. They arrive in a new land that is already inhabited by people, and they call the people of Zarahemla. We find out throughout the Book of Mormon that the people of Zarahemla descended from a man named Mulek. He was one of the sons of King Zedekiah, who was the king of Jerusalem when Lehi and his family left. So he had fled Jerusalem and had been brought to the Promised Land as well, around the same time that Lehi and his family would have been leaving Jerusalem. Over the years, they had grown as a people, but they had also fought many wars with each other, and their language had changed over time. When Mosiah and his people find them, they join together. Mosiah becomes the king of both the people of Zarahemla and the Nephites. He teaches all of the people of Zarahemla their language, and they grow as a people. There's more that Amalekite teaches and talks about to end the Book of Omni, but last of all, he tells us about Mosiah's son, King Benjamin, and how he was a righteous and great king. Malachi says that he has no posterity of his own, so he's going to pass the plates on to King Benjamin. When he makes an end to his record, he also makes an end to the small plates of Nephi. Okay, are we following up to this point? Good. I want to pause here again briefly because I need to ask you another question. Has anyone ever spoiled anything like a book or a movie for you? Well, spoiler alert, everybody dies. Now, Mormon inserts a little chapter right in between the small plates of Nephi and the start of the abridgment of the large plates, and he spoils the whole thing. We'll forgive him because he's a great prophet, but he tells us that he is writing several hundred years later. At that point, he says that he has witnessed almost the entire destruction of the Nephites. He also tells us that Jesus had already come and gone hundreds of years earlier, and at this point they are just hoping that the Lord will preserve this record for the Lamanites for some future day. He tells us that the things that he included in this book are there to testify of Christ and to tell us of other things which must surely come to pass. He trusts that the Lord has a wise purpose in all this, but he doesn't necessarily know what it is. Finally, he ends up by telling us more about King Benjamin and the great leader he was. This sets us up perfectly to be able to jump back into the story. So now get ready to read one of the coolest sermons ever given.